This is Napoleon's Corps System, explained. Napoleon is well known as one of the most brilliant military strategists in history. His corps system reorganized large armies into smaller, independent army corps, able to march, fight, and survive independently. His armies could cover more ground, strike from multiple directions, and react faster than any enemy. We will follow Napoleon and the Grande Armée at the prime of their existence, as they march, with morale soaring high, from the camp at Boulogne on the French Channel coast, across the mountains and plains of Europe, as they dominate the continent uncontested for over a decade. Along the way, we will learn all about Napoleon's strategic military genius, his revolutionary corps d'armes system, and why it was so effective. We will discover how this system made the Grande Armée so dominant over their enemies for so many years, and learn all about the unique maneuvers, like the central position, which Napoleon devised and deployed on battlefields across Europe to take full advantage of this new system. This is Napoleon's Corps System, explained. Napoleon seized the initiative by exploiting the speed and flexibility of the corps d'armes system and the Bataillon Carré. These two innovations, combined with Napoleon's organizational and intellectual abilities, gave the French an advantage that the Allies would not overcome for 7 years. A corps d'armes consisted of infantry, artillery, and cavalry in sufficient proportion to allow it to act as an independent entity. There were many advantages to this formation, as Napoleon related in a letter to Eugene Beauharnais in June 1809. Here is a general principle of war. A corps of 25,000 to 30,000 men can be left on its own. Well handled, it can fight, or alternatively avoid action, and maneuver according to circumstances without harm coming to it. Because an opponent cannot force it to accept an engagement, but if it chooses to do so, it can fight alone for a long time. The average corps consisted of 3 infantry divisions, a light cavalry division, 3 heavy 12-pound artillery batteries, and 2 medium 6 or 8-pound batteries. Each infantry division was composed of 3 infantry brigades of 2 infantry regiments each, a 6 or 8-pound foot artillery battery, and a 6 or 8-pound horse artillery battery. The light cavalry division was comprised of 2 cavalry brigades each, and 2 cavalry regiments of either hussars, lancers, or chasseurs. The corps d'armes gave its commander, a general or a marshal, many advantages over the armies of the Ancien regime, which used the tactics and structure of the 18th century. Armies had advanced into battle with artillery, cavalry, and infantry in one form or another since the days of Alexander the Great. In Napoleon's time, this was still true. Mac's army of 70,000 men contained substantial numbers of all 3 of these arms. The difference between Napoleon's system and that of the Ancien regime lay in the subordination of these assets. When a Napoleonic corps was engaged in battle, its commander could call on heavy artillery and cavalry support without having to contact a higher echelon. An Austrian or Russian wing commander in battle would have to appeal to a higher echelon for such support, costing him time and often the battle. The corps d'armes became an even deadlier weapon when employed in the Bataillon Carré. The Bataillon Carré, or armed square, was a march formation in which several corps d'armes would move in a square or diamond formation with Napoleon at the center. Ideally, a corps would be no more than 1 day's march from the 2 nearest corps, and the front and rear corps no more than 2 or 3 days' march apart. Security and intelligence for the formation would be supplied by a cavalry screen preceding these corps. The screen would consist of units from the light cavalry divisions subordinate to each corps. This formation provided Napoleon with the flexibility and speed necessary to achieve his strategic goal, the annihilation of the opposing force. This formation's diamond shape made it possible for Napoleon to shift the army's strategic direction by simply moving the cavalry screen to face the desired point, redesignating the nearest corps as the advance guard and its reciprocal as the rear guard. This proved to be a much more effective formation than that of the Ancien regime. An Ancien regime army could never achieve this goal. The armies of the Ancien regime marched on one road or closely grouped roads roughly in the order of cavalry, infantry, artillery, and logistics. If they wished to change direction, the formation would have to take the time to realign or move in a wide arc as if it were on rails to face the approaching enemy. If it attempted to move as the Bataillon Carré did, it would be in danger of engaging the enemy with only one arm of its force, placing it at a distinct disadvantage. Because the Bataillon Carré consisted of corps d'armes equipped with all arms, the formation could never be fully disrupted on the march. The use of separate and widely spaced roads, combined with the French strategy of living off the land, gave the French a decided speed advantage. By freeing themselves of a logistics train, the French were able to move far faster than the Allies. But this arrangement was dependent on the availability of supplies in the army's path. Serious problems arose when the Grande Armée moved into Poland, Spain, and Russia, where food was not as plentiful or the populace not so willing to surrender it. Both the Corps d'Armes and the Bataillon Carré would not have been as successful without Napoleon's organizational and intellectual abilities to guide them. Napoleon and his chief of staff, Marshal Berthier, were able to maintain control of an army of several 100,000 men spread across vast distances through intense preparation and Napoleon's legendary memory. Each night, Napoleon would dictate to Berthier the staff orders for each corps. Berthier and his staff would then turn Napoleon's instructions into workable, detailed orders to be distributed later that evening. In this way, Napoleon was able to keep a decentralized army under centralized control, which he felt was vital to its success. Nothing is as important in war as undivided command. For this reason, when war is carried on against a single power, there should only be one army, acting upon one base and conducted by one chief. This system proved to be highly effective, as was shown by the Grande Armée's movement in the 1805 campaign and those to follow. The primary objective of every Napoleonic campaign was not territory or an enemy's capital city, but the destruction of their army. To accomplish this task, Napoleon relied on three variations of offensive maneuver: the maneuver in the rear, the central position, and the flank attack. The maneuver in the rear involved both an enveloping maneuver and a flank attack. The advance guard would pin the enemy's force while the flank corps, using either terrain or light cavalry as a screen, would move around the enemy and take up a position across his line of communications. The opposing army would then be forced to disengage and attempt to clear its line of communications against a prepared foe on a ground of their own choosing. The maneuver in the rear was designed to take full advantage of the Bataillon Carré and worked best when Napoleon either outnumbered or had a roughly equal number of troops as his opponent. If he was himself outnumbered, he could maintain the initiative by seizing the central position. The central position was an offensive or defensive maneuver in which Napoleon would place his advance guard and cavalry reserve between the two strong opposing forces. Once in position, they would prevent the enemy from concentrating its force. By operating on interior lines, Napoleon would then shift his corps to engage each force in turn. This would allow him to negate the enemy's numerical advantage and give his force local superiority of numbers. The flank attack also involved the pinning of the enemy by the advance guard and the cavalry reserve. Once the enemy was engaged, the remaining French corps would take up a position along the flanks, forcing the enemy to engage its reserves to meet this new challenge. Once the enemy's reserve was committed, Napoleon would use massed artillery batteries to create a breach in the enemy's line. The French reserve would then attack this breach and the enemy would be routed. All three maneuvers demonstrate the advantages of the Corps d'Armes in engaging a larger foe, and the Bataillon Carré in allowing Napoleon to quickly concentrate his own forces at a chosen point. But all three maneuvers were dependent on Napoleon's ability to maneuver his corps and bring the enemy to battle. What do you think about Napoleon's military strategies, and why were they so successful? Was it the corps system that gave him the edge over his enemies by allowing divisions of his army to divide and conquer? Or was it the way he used this system and its strategic maneuvers like the Bataillon Carré and the central position that made the Grande Armée so dominant? If you enjoyed the journey so far, make sure to give this video a like, subscribe to our channel, and turn on your notifications. I'll see you then. I'm Connor with the Motion Visual. Vive l'Empereur!